Welcome, lovely listeners, to SoulStirred, stories of growth and the human experience. I'm Emily Garcia.
And I'm Kasey Clark.
We will be your guides on this journey. We are so glad you are here.
Each week, we'll come together, sometimes with other incredible thinkers, creators, and adventurers, to generously share stories of self-discovery, recovery, triumph, and what it means to live a life on purpose.
No matter where you are in your own journey, connection is here for you at SoulStirred.
Settle in, take a deep breath in, and let's inspire each other.
Welcome to SoulStirred. Welcome back, SoulStirred listeners. Today we are here with Kristen Spencer. Kristen is a wife, mom, noni, and the founder of the Hummingbird Project. The Hummingbird Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to saving lives by raising awareness, offering fact-based education, and providing resources for harm reduction and fentanyl poisoning. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you here with us today. I want to inform our SoulStirred listeners that Kristen is one of my very best friends in the whole wide world. We happened upon each other, what's it been, about 20 years ago now?
Yes, right about 20.
Yeah, when our sons were on a Pee-wee football team together with Coach Ty Richardson, and we were at Roxborough Park in Littleton, Colorado at a football practice that we had both hurried to pack up your minivan and my SUV full of all the equipment and get our truckloads of boys down to practice on time so that they didn't have to run sprints up and down the side of that hill. And I remember all of our boys piling out of our cars and running down to practice, and then you and I opening our tailgates and sitting down together and saying, "Hi,
Yeah.
who are you and where'd you come from? Because you feel right to me."
Yes.
Like there was an instant chemistry between
Absolutely.
us that we couldn't fully understand or even embrace. We were like two excited little girls that couldn't wait to get to know each other.
Absolutely. You took pictures. I take pictures. We were destined to be together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we started to share our stories with each other, we learned that there were so many commonalities and synchronicities between us. We both had fallen madly in love in our late adolescence, like early 20s, with men who we believed were the loves of our life, that were both military men. We both were called to vessel our first children into the world as mothers early in life. We had sons who were the same age. And then we discovered that those men were not actually meant to be the men of our lives, although they were at that time. And it was like these undeniable, universally driven relationships, right? Because our babies needed to be born. We both described our stories that our sons' souls were like flying around out in the universe, and they chose us to find these men, you know, so that they could get their ride down onto the planet and into this level of consciousness. And never before had I met somebody who could talk like me and think like me and believed like I did about the soul's journey in the universe. And she was immediately my person. You fast forward after a couple of years of spending many weekends together, creating memories and documenting those memories. And of course, we ended up becoming the football team moms. So we were always on the sidelines taking pictures and making albums and celebrating our whole team of boys. And so at the end of the year, I, of course, because I had previously been one of these people who bit off much more than I could chew in life in so many ways, I volunteered to be in charge of the banquet dinner celebration and how we were going to highlight every boy on this football team by making a literal like scrapbook page for every single player and putting together a video that included pictures of every single player, both like sitting still with their uniforms and helmets on, but also in active play in a game. And wouldn't you know, it's like 9 p.m. the night before this banquet, and I'm only like a third of the way and the pressure is on. And I tell this story only to highlight the kind of friend that Kristen is, because I called her and I'm desperate. And I'm like, I have put 14 ounces into my 12-ounce can, as we all know I do from time to time. I'm going to be totally screwed. I can't let the boys down. Everything is on the line. I need your help. And she lived right up the street from me. And she came immediately over. And we spent that whole night together, making memory pages and finishing this video. And by the time the banquet happened the following night, it was all complete. And every single one of our boys got to be celebrated and highlighted. And we felt so proud. And we couldn't have ever done any of that without you, including some more 3 cents.
Thank you. I was going to say I was lucky enough to meet you at a time in my life when parenthood became interesting. And we would, I didn't have other friends. I was such a young mom that I didn't have other friends that were my age that I could call and say, is this normal? Is, that my child is doing this or has said this. And so we traded stories back and forth for years and each relieved the time that it was not our story to tell, I think, but supportive in knowing what the other one is going through. So
absolutely. Eventually
I'm lucky to have
became friends, and there's a good story there too.
Yes,
because the
real guys in our life.
Right. Well, the comparison point for us both was, and then we both found and married these men that accepted and raised our sons as if they were their own. And we got to talking like, do we think they'd like each other? They both really love music and football.
Neither one of them really like people very much. So
and
maybe
that's what she said. My husband doesn't people. And I go, oh, that's so perfect because neither does mine.
So, and they joke, they tell the story that when we finally talked them into meeting that they said, so Adam invited him over for football, and he said, but I don't really like to talk during football. And her husband said, well, I don't talk during football either. And he goes, so we can just sit here all day and eat and not talk and just look at each other and not talk. And they became best friends right after. Right after
ever since. Exactly, which is just also so perfect.
Yes.
Yeah. And so today, what we're here to talk with everybody about is one of the things that I immediately, I literally bowed down to Kristen when I found this out in that first parking lot at football practice. She is the mother of 5 sons.
Yes.
And here I am meeting her at 30 years old, and I'm like, you have 5 sons? Like, how in the hell do you? I was like, I'm not worthy of being in your presence. I had always said that.
And to me back then, I was like, of course I have 5. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me that, I didn't get it. And now my youngest 2 sons, they're the ages now that my husband and I were when we had our 5th kid, and they don't have kids, they're not on that path yet. And I look at them and I say, oh my gosh, how did we do it? What were we thinking?
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that remarkable? I look at the kids now and I think they're so young. And yet we had all of them. I mean, we were
right. Exactly.
That's such an important point because that takes me over to saying I want to hold our younger selves with so much compassion. We were as young as we see them being right now when we were their mother.
Yes.
And we didn't know jack shit about the world.
No. We did not. No, we didn't.
Yeah.
No, but I do remember having that feeling all the time when people would stop me in a restaurant and ask me if they were all mine, or my mother-in-law would just say, I just don't know how you do it. And I'm like, I just don't understand what you mean. I mean, I grew up in a big family. I grew up around a lot of kids. So I was used to being in the chaos, I guess. Mm-hmm. And my kids were very well behaved. And I just, we just lived a life. But I can remember catching people's eyes every now and then and seeing like the look on their face, like, or pointing at us, like, oh my gosh, look at all those kids or whatever. So
the comments like, that lady has her hands full.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Well,
exactly.
You know what? Kristen does her best work under pressure. And
I do.
And that's going to come
That's true.
later. She is her most creative and productive and just best self when there's a swirl around her. I don't know how
that's very true.
It, but it's like when the swirl is happening around her, she paints it colorful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's my ADD.
Yeah, well,
I just, if I don't have enough going on, then I feel chaos.
Yeah.
Then I feel chaotic. But if I
Exactly.
have enough things to focus on, then it feels normal,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, it's
yeah,
probably your trauma response, but we'll talk about that in another
probably.
conversation.
That's I'm quite certain that's true.
It's also your superpower, and that's how this
Also
works.
true.
It's like we turn
Yes.
trauma into our gift.
Yes.
That's, yeah.
That's my goal. That's
Yeah.
my goal.
So your two oldest boys are John, and Christopher, not in that order. Christopher is first
Right.
and then John.
Right.
And they ultimately became best friends with my oldest son, Corey. And so tell us a little bit about Chris and John and just who are they as people?
Sure. Well, John is actually number 3 in line of the
Right.
5. When my husband and I met, my oldest son, Christopher, was 2, and I was pregnant with my second son, but going through a divorce, and he had a 10-month-old son. And so when we started dating, they were 10 months and 2 months old. And we've been together ever since. My kids have never known another dad. And then we went on to have 2 other sons of our own. And
Jordan and
Christopher, so we have the big boys and the little boys is kind of how we always referred to them. But Christopher was the life of the party. He is charismatic and, funny, and just one of those people that when he walks in a room, he demands attention without saying anything. People just want to be around him, and he wanted to be Jim Carrey when he grew up, so he likes to joke and be silly, and and he just likes to find the lighter things in life. And John is like very soulful and just sweet and kind, and he's always everyone's favorite. He's always, from the time he was a baby, and he would just, sit on your lap and snuggle with you no matter who it is, and they played off of each other forever. Christopher talks for him all the time, and and it never changes. And but they both have really amazing personalities, and they're amazing people, amazing humans for sure. And they, integrated in with Bryce, who's my son that's in between the two of them. And the 3 of them were inseparable for, literally you could not see one without the other 2. In fact, as they got a little older, that wasn't always, it was so cute when they were little, but as they got a little older and I had like a 15, 14, and 13-year-old, they might as well have all been 15, because they were, the first time one of them smoked weed, they all smoked weed. The first time so the 13 and 14-year-olds were doing the 15-year-old things anyway, which made it a little, that made it a little, everything was amplified for sure, Everything good they did together. Everything not so great they did together too. So yeah.
I feel like the best line that describes sort of the essence of the boys for me is if they were talking to each other, it would sound like, John, you are my quiet place and I am your wild.
Absolutely.
John was this quiet, sort of tender hugger with deep brown eyes, deep, like you could get lost in the abyss of his eyes, and this huge tender heart. And he just was soft. And Christopher was color.
And loud and happy and like sunshine. Noise. That's what we kind of describe him as. Christopher's like sunshine, and John is like the moon. Like it's like those are the, they're both dynamic in their in what they do, and but completely opposite, but both amazing.
They were yin and yang.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Which is also perfect.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so then tell us, my love, what happened in 2019?
Well, it was November of 2019. Christopher and John were together. Christopher at this point was 24. John was 22, and Christopher lived on his own in an apartment. He was so happy and excited. He finally got his own place, and he had been living with us, parenting his daughter, who he had right after he graduated high school, and found a place. Moved in and was getting settled. She was still with us and kind of going back and forth until he could find his way and, in being a single dad. And
that's Penelope. We call her Sweet Pea.
Yes, my little sweet pea. And she was my first girl. So, I mean, I was over the moon. Like, she's the princess of everything. I finally got to do all the girl things with her, and she's an incredible human all on her own. Um, but Christopher had invited John over to his house. Neither one of them had work the next day. Like, it was in the middle of the week. It was like on a Wednesday. And they were going to stay up all night, play video games. I actually ordered pizza for them. And they were just going to, have a boys' night and do online, you know, video games or whatever. And um, our family in general is very close. We have, big group chats that we talk all the time. And I reached out to them a couple of times and didn't get a response. Or I got, it would be like, yeah, okay, we're good, but we're going to play, whatever. And I didn't hear from them for a few hours, which was not abnormal. And they were normal kids. You know what I mean? They're trying to find their independence, and I'm trying to give it to them. And, so I, in my mind, going, nope, don't call him again. Don't call him again. Call you, And I didn't hear from him the whole night. The next day, I told my husband, I feel like something's not right. I haven't heard from them. Now we have iPhones. Their messages were turning green. And so I knew that the phone on their battery the battery on their phone had died. And it wasn't normal. But again, neither one of them had worked that day. I knew they were going to be, doing their own thing. And so I kind of just put it in the back of my mind. But by the afternoon that day, I started asking the other boys, hey, have either of you talked to, Christopher or John? And they said, no, I haven't. I mean, in a couple of days I talked to him. I was like, well, okay. And so, of course, me secretly being, the mom that I am, I put everybody in bed and did the thing. And then I went online and started checking hospitals, and started checking police departments, and started seeing if they were, where could they be? Why aren't they answering me? And of course, my husband is like, they're fine. They're boys. Just let them be. You're going to hear from them. This is what boys do, type of thing.
But you're worried
And
at this point. You're feeling something. You're intuiting something does not tell.
Yeah. And especially with John. Christopher was, his own free spirit, and he could go a week or two, and that wouldn't be an abnormal thing for me not to hear from him. Mm-hmm. But John, that was not normal. So I told my husband that night, I said, well, I haven't heard from them now for 24 hours. It's been a whole day. So if I don't hear from them by the morning, I'm going to drive over there and find out what's going on. And John was supposed to work the next day, right? This day 2. Mm-hmm. So I got up in the morning. I had a hair appointment that day. And it was fairly early in the morning. So I went to my hairstylist. And as I was sitting under the dryer, I noticed that I got a call from John's work, right? Mm-hmm. He was a manager at Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. And I saw it come across, and I was like, oh, okay, good. He's calling me, And so I pick up the phone, and it wasn't John. It was his manager. Mm-hmm. And he asked me if I had, have you talked to John? Did he remember he was supposed to work today? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have not talked to him, and that is not normal. He had been there for about a year and a half, and had never called in sick one day, mm-hmm. had never been late, had never, he had a perfect record. And so that's why he called me. He said, I'm worried because he's never missed anything. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, well, thanks for letting me know. And I told my hairstylist, I don't even need you to dry my hair. I'm going to go.
The chair.
Right. And so I left, and I started driving to the apartment, and I called my husband on the way, and I just said, something's not right. I'm gonna go check on the boys, and he's like, okay, so I'll stay on the phone with you. He was driving onto the other side of town to go to a meeting, and he said, but you'll be there before I am, and so I'll stay on the phone, just make sure everything's okay. So I get to the apartment, and I saw both of their cars in the parking lot. And so I knew they were at least there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I walked up to the apartment and knocked on the door, and there was no answer. And I knocked louder, and all I could hear was my son's cat meowing, like really loud, like crying and meowing almost,
crying out for help.
And so I knew knew something was not, I knew it wasn't going to be great. I didn't know exactly what I was going to walk into, but I knew that it wasn't going to be good. The door was locked. But I had co-signed the apartment with Christopher, being that was his first place and all of that. So I was actually able to go to the office and ask for a key because, I gave them my ID because I was on the lease, and they gave me a key. And I went back to the apartment and unlocked the door. And as soon as I unlocked it, the cat kind of ran out. So I looked down and I was like, well, that's crazy. He doesn't do that normally. And when I looked back up, I could see them both sitting. They had like maneuvered the chairs right in front of the TV for their video games, so it was almost like door chairs, right, right in the front. And I knew immediately they were not okay. And so I'm on the phone with my husband still, and I'm kind of like panicking. I'm like, they're not okay. They're not okay. And I kind of started like, I don't know if I screamed or if I, cried or what I did, but I stepped out of the apartment. And so other people started, heard me and started running over.
Mm.
And my husband and somebody called 911, and, that whole thing started. And the investigators got there fairly quickly. My husband was about 45 minutes away from me. And so he told me, just, don't move. I'm on my way. And he stayed on the phone with me the whole time. But his apartment was right across from the swimming pool in the complex. And so I just kind of held onto the fence. I haven't talked about this in a long time.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah.
And we can hold this with you.
And I dropped down to my knees. And I just tried to focus on one thing, There was some flowers in front of me, and I was just looking at the flowers, waiting for my husband to get there. Because I knew he would know what to do. He would, he would know how to handle it. Of course, he didn't know any better than I did, but he took the role on and acted like he did anyway. And he is, for sure. And so he made all the phone calls. He made, he called our other kids, and he called, the people that we needed to call in. The craziest part of it was,
He called us.
Oh, he did. Yes, he called you. And I think, I also kind of looking for someone to say, what do we do? Like, what do we, because these are things that you don't learn, you don't know until you're in, you're thrown into one of these situations. And we didn't know what had happened, right? I could see on their coffee table that they had been, doing something, there was a pipe but they smoked marijuana and, whatever. And that wasn't necessarily the first thing on my mind. I thought maybe somebody broke into the apartment or, like something was happening. Right.
What was the thing on your mind? Do you remember?
I remember seeing them, just the way they were sitting, I could tell they weren't okay. And it had been a little while, so it wasn't like it had just happened and like we could call someone to rescue them and something like that. I knew it was too late. And the hardest part in that moment was we live in a city, right? We live in Phoenix. Well, Scottsdale, or actually we lived in Gilbert at the time, but we live in a big city. There's one coroner in the whole city, and you have to wait your turn. Mm-hmm. And so this happened at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I stood in front of his apartment until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night until they came to get him, both of them. And because I wouldn't leave, I wasn't going to leave.
No, you can't leave.
No. But at this time, my other kids came, and we stayed outside most of the time. At the very end, they let us go in and see them or talk to them if we wanted to. But it was like torture. It was torture knowing that they were there and we couldn't do anything,
Mm.
And why? I just remember thinking, like, how can this huge city have, this happens every day. Like, you make these people, you make people like wait, and it's that part was just crazy to me. But we happened to have an investigator that was on the case who was amazing. She, hugged us, and and she told me, first of all, she said, I have a feeling this had to do with fentanyl.
Mm.
And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, we found some remnants of a pill. We're going to test it. They took their phones, they took their computers, they took everything to try to investigate, what happened. And ultimately, fast forward, it took a few weeks. They had autopsies and all of those things. And their toxicology report came back, and it was fentanyl. And she told us at the same time that a couple of interesting things. First of all, she told me that this was the first case she'd ever had where it'd been multiple siblings. Like she had been in a situation where friends had been together or things like that. But this was the first time she had ever had brothers, in a situation. So she was very compassionate. And the reason I said we were lucky to get her anyway was the whole reason she was in, much like your stories, she was in law enforcement and in this line of work is because she lost a brother to a drug overdose, like 15 years prior. And so she was so warm and lovely,
compassion.
And she really, I was like a small child, who needed my hand held, to like where to go, what to do now, who do I call, what do I do?
Yeah.
And she was, instrumental in helping us with that. And what she told us when she called us about the report was that they didn't know this was going to happen. She said, we've gone through every message on their phone. We've gone through everything on their computers. And because she said they didn't do this on purpose. She said they wanted to party. They wanted to have a fun night. They got something from a neighbor who knew somebody, and they split one pill. They had one pill and they split it. She said the craziest thing about that was that their toxicology reports were completely different. Christopher had way more than John did of fentanyl that they got out of the same pill, right?
Wow.
And so that blew my mind. So that was the first thing that I was like, what do you mean? It's like how, like, I didn't understand, right? I was not familiar with drugs in general. I was not, I grew up in just say no, right? And I was a people pleaser and a mom pleaser and a teacher pleaser. So my parents told me don't do drugs, and I just said, okay, and I didn't. And the hard part of that is they didn't teach me how or why or not. That's how I passed it on to my kids. I just said, don't do drugs. They will hurt you. I had in my mind pictured, marijuana is a gateway drug. And if you smoke weed, in 3 years, you're going to be living under a bridge. And, those are the pictures that were in my head. And so
we were the parents that sent our kids to rehab when we found out they were smoking weed.
They smoked weed. Yes, we are.
Isn't that ironic?
And it's so crazy. I still can picture my son Christopher because he was supposed to be going to college, and I was like, and he's like, Mom, I don't need to go to rehab, and I'm like, yes, you do.
Yes,
and he's like, no, really, I don't. I'm not an addict. And I go, no, nope, that's what all addicts say. You're gonna go to rehab.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not gonna pay for your school unless you go and do this 30-day. And he goes, okay, well, I guess I'll go. And I showed up to do the parent visit and do, I did all the things that it was about 3 weeks in that I was looking around. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is not where you belong. Like you were right. And he's like, I was just doing it for play, And so that actually catapulted me into where ultimately I'm going with the Hummingbird Project, because I felt like this urge to get this out, right? To share this information, to like, what do you mean? I had 2 kids who died off of half of a pill that they thought was Oxycontin. And they had no idea that it was laced with fentanyl, of course. And the reason I also found out later that the reason the investigator was pretty certain it was fentanyl right up front is, of course, in 2019, that's when it started blowing up, right? The numbers started going crazy. But they had a bunch of cases that prior, like 2-week period. Kids were dying on college campuses. And, and so they think that there was one big batch that came in.
Yeah.
And it was dispersed. And they never caught who did it. They don't know where it came from.
I just wanted to address the college campuses thing real quick if I can. I saw a news story this weekend while at your house that the University of Michigan is putting in vending machines with Narcan.
Yay. That's exciting.
Yeah, I didn't mean to
That's
interrupt.
exciting.
You go back.
Yeah, no, that's
Progress.
fantastic news.
Mhm.
That leads me to say that the other thing that happened to me during that period was I was catapulted into this world that I didn't want to be in. I knew nothing about. And I started feeling the shame of it, the stigma of it. Not because I was ashamed, but like people were ashamed for me almost, right? I had 3 people ask me within the first 2 weeks, what was I going to tell people about how my kids died?
Oh,
And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean? What am I going to tell people? And the third lady said, well, since there were 2 of them, you could tell people they died in a car accident. And I said, why would I do that? And she's like, well, I mean, just say, I'm just saying, if you would be worried about what people would think or whatever. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, they didn't do this on purpose. Even if they did, even if they were addicts, who cared? Like, why?
what part of me?
Why is there shame in that?
Part of me is supposed to feel ashamed of what's happened.
Right. Or how can I feel ashamed of these are my children? And so that really put a fire in me to, like, I felt like I needed to stand on a rooftop and yell to people, listen to me. So my story doesn't become your story,
Yes.
and people do listen to me. They have listened to me. But so that was a fire burning in me. Right.
Yeah.
And then this happened in November. Both of them have February birthdays. So Christopher is February 8th. John is February 26th. And 3 months roughly had passed when it was coming upon their birthdays. And I was feeling this like urgency to start a legacy, to make sure they weren't forgotten, to make sure people knew who they are and what they were in this world. And so I wanted to do something to honor them, but I wanted all of my other kids to be involved, and so I came up with this idea of doing random acts of kindness. Christopher was going to be turning 25, John was going to turn 23, and so on their selected birthdays, we did 25 random acts of kindness for Christopher and 23 random acts of kindness on John's birthday. And I posted about it on my social media. And I had overwhelming responses, from my friends and family saying, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. We want to participate. We want to do it as well. And so I was like, okay, sure. So I ended up creating like a group on Facebook for people, who wanted to do it. And we ended up doing that very first year, 3 months in, I think over 500 random acts of kindness were done in their honor, in their name, across the United States, just from people, from my Facebook page, And so that gave me the extra like fuel to be like, okay, I'm on to something here. And one part I forgot to mention was the night we went home when they passed away. 2 things happened. My husband pulled me aside and we were standing in my bathroom and he said, we have a choice, right now. We have to decide right now how we're going to face this and how we're going to, go out into the world. Because if we fall apart and we can't do anything, people will understand and nobody will be mad at us or judge us or whatever. We can do that. And I stopped him and I said, no, we can't. And he said, what? And I said, I don't know how. I don't know when or where. But we have to find our way through this because we have other kids who deserve whole parents. And I don't want them to grow up in a broken world in their own home, or be jaded in the world anyway, right? I want them to feel and know that there's still love and light and happiness and that bad things happen to good people, but it doesn't make the whole world bad, And so I just said, we have to find our way. And he agreed. And so the Random Acts of Kindness was born. And then the very next day, my mother-in-law was in the kitchen and she called me over and she said that she had a dream the night before and 2 hummingbirds came to her in her dream and wanted her to tell me that they were okay. And so I cried, of course, and I hugged her and I thanked her and kind of went on about my business. And then the next thing I know, she's motioning to me to come over to the sliding glass door where she had gone on the back patio. And she said, look. And I go out there and there's 2 hummingbirds flying around the patio. I have never seen a hummingbird at that house in my life ever. It was in November. It was in the winter. I looked it up and I'm like, is this normal? No, it's not normal. And I was like, wow. And they've been there ever since. I see them every day. Not particularly those 2 anymore because I've since moved to a new house, but we still have our old house. And one of my other best friends is living in that house now, and she sees them every day. And I have 2 new ones at my house that visit me daily. And they showed up, and it's the first month I lived here, I saw no birds at all. And then, one day I was standing outside, and there was a hummingbird. I go, oh, I think I heard a hummingbird. No way. And then, sure enough, there was another one, and now they're here all the time. Yeah. So it was fitting, when we moved forward that that's kind of how the Hummingbird Project came about. But so back to what I was going to say about. Let me see.
You were with
where was I at?
The random acts of kindness, and it was
random acts of kindness. So I'm sorry,
the rocks.
Yes. Yes, and so that gave me an idea. Okay, well now I want to for sure do something when we come up on the 1-year anniversary, right? And I had seen before somebody posting about painting kindness rocks and leaving nice messages or whatever, and I was like, that could work because then people can be involved. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. People can do it if they're old or they're young or whatever. And so I started posting just to see if anybody would be interested in joining me. And my goal that first year was to put out 365 rocks total. Like that's what one for every day they had been gone, right? And so I made that my goal, and we ended up putting over 5,000 rocks out, including you, Kasey, and Tyler. Put rocks out for us in our old neighborhood at their old house, which was so special. But we ended up with rocks in 36 states and 6 countries that first year. And so I was like, okay, I'm onto something, right? And everybody that was participating was curious, and they wanted to know more and hear more, not about my, like what happened to my boys, but what is this, epidemic that's happening. And so I spent some time thinking, how can we turn this into something? How can we, make this into something that
make it matter,
is good for us and good for other people? I wanted to channel this, like I said, I felt like a fire at first, I was definitely grieving because, I was grieving, but I had this really unique, amazing, special experience in doing it because my husband told me that same day that when we decided we were gonna stick it out and try to be on the positive side of things, he told me, this is our fortress. Nothing comes in here that you don't want in here. If you come into this room and you close the door, that is your space. You can have it as long as you want, and nobody will go past this, this line right here without asking you or without you telling me that it's okay. And that was especially perfect to those first few weeks when there's thousands of people there, and I just couldn't be out there anymore. And I could go to my room and shut the door and I just have this space, and it allowed me time to really sit with the grief of it, but also sit with I watched a lot of videos of theirs, and I watched, I looked at a lot of pictures, and I really just tried to remember and feel, because I was afraid I would forget their voices, And so I feel like I really made a lot of progress in that first year, because I had a purpose and I had, something that I wanted their lives to mean something, And so we had some friends who got together and invited us to dinner. or actually it was lunch, and told my husband and I, we have known, this is about a year into it. I was coming up on getting ready to do this kindness rock project, and they said, we know that, that you guys are trying to do something. You're wanting to do a foundation or a charity or some sort of event. And they gave us money to start that. They gave us seed money to start a foundation. And so that was like my catapult, and I didn't know exactly how I wanted it to go. I didn't know, should I be talking to, parents about grief, or should I be talking to, kids about not doing, I just didn't know exactly where I wanted it to be. Dealing with, like recovery, because, I had sent my kid to rehab and realized that, that's not where he belonged, but it didn't feel right to me to be there because that wasn't their space either. They were adventurers. They were, the life of the party. They liked to go to music festivals and raves, and, that was their whole world. Their vibe was just to be with their friends and to be, and so I said, these are the people who need to hear what we have to say. The people who are in this life, they're just trying to have a good time, right? And I had to sit with that for a while too, because I would be judgmental of I was judgmental of my own kids when I found out they were smoking weed and things like that. And I realized that I don't need to do that. So my husband and I kind of went back and forth, and we said, okay, so when I'm having a panic moment, like, okay, now I have all this to start this foundation. Now what do I do with it? Where do I go? And he said, well, what do we wish would have been different for us? Like, what could have made a change in our story? And I thought about it, and I kept, the only thing I could come back to is I just didn't know. Like, I didn't know about all of the, I've learned so much in these few months of research, and now it's kind of becoming it's on the news every night because it's happening so often. And I said, I feel like we should educate people. I feel like we should get the word out about this, and about, not necessarily, I'm not promoting drug use by any means, but I don't want to shame people or condone them for doing it, and let them know that they can be normal young adults and experiment and not have to die. There are things you can do. There are ways you can experience all of the things you want to experience, without it being dangerous, in that sense. Of course, there's other dangers and things like that, but I'm singularly focused, on the fentanyl side of things, because it is so unnecessary, and like I said, I've learned, more than I can. I probably will never be able to put all the things that I would, because everything I find, I'm like, oh, I got to pin this, and talk about that, and then I came upon a Brene Brown quote that said, but it's something along the lines of, you're one day, you're going to tell your story, and it's going to become someone else's survival guide. And so that kind of became my mantra and my motivation, to prevent this, from happening to other people. I'll give you one other interesting, cool point about it. I know so much about it that I'm so surprised when I talk to somebody and they have never heard of it, or they don't know, that it can be in, all of these different things, and that there's a way that you can avoid it, And every day it surprises me, and I just talked to a guy recently who was a bartender in downtown Scottsdale, or like in Old Town Scottsdale, for 10 years. And he's like, I had no idea. And I'm like, how can you be around all of this all the time and not know the things? And so that got my mind thinking too. And so we have kind of evolved, in what we're doing, in our approach that we're taking. I started out thinking, okay, I know what we need to do. We need to take all this money and buy all the Narcan that we can, and buy all the testing strips, and give them to everybody, right? Like, we'll stand at the gates at the music festivals, and we're going to hand it to every single person.
Yeah.
And then I sat back and I was like, wait a minute. If I go to a baseball game and they give me a bobblehead that I don't want yet, or I don't know what it is, I'm just going to toss it, and it's going to go to waste, right? And so I was like, oh, Narcan is way too expensive for that,
Yeah.
And at the time, Narcan was still, you had to get in some states it was illegal altogether. Like, you couldn't get it at all. And then in other states, it was starting to become legal, but you had to have a prescription to get it. And then just last year, most states, Arizona being one of them, have made it where it's now on the count. It's over the counter, right? You can walk into a Walgreens and buy it off the shelf, which is amazing, but it's $45 a box. $45. So I'm thinking, okay, here's my 22-year-old kid and my 24-year-old kid wanting to go to a music festival with their friends for the weekend, and they have, $100 to spend or whatever. So they're going to buy, that has to cover their food, their water, their T-shirts, their cigarettes, whatever it is. Are they going to want to go to Walgreens and buy a $45 box of Narcan that they might need, and put it, you know what I mean? And I just, that's never going to happen. That's not realistic. That's just not what's going to happen. And so I said, well, we have to find a way to make it free, like to get it out for free. So that was my first mission. And then I thought that I pictured, all of the boxes of Narcan everywhere. And I'm like, oh, no, okay, that's not going to work. Well, what we could do is if we have people go online and request it, and then when they show up to the show with their wristbands, they can go pick it up at a table, right? Because we know they want it. They're doing the work to get it. We're going to train them on how to recognize an overdose and what to do in that situation. And then what we started running into, and I'm still having this issue today, is the venues will not allow us to come in because they have zero tolerance policy for drugs. And if we're giving away things that can prevent people from dying from drugs, that means they're acknowledging that people are using drugs.
Which is so short-sighted. It doesn't include life-saving devices there for when accidents happen.
I told the first time somebody said that to me, I was so shocked. And I go, you were one of those people who didn't want to give condoms to teenagers either, right? Like, because they're going to get their girlfriend
They're going to have sex anyway. Giving them condoms helps them do it safely. It's part of the adolescent development exploration process to test your limits and take risks, push past to try to find your own autonomous identity from your parents. It's typical.
Exactly. So now I'm like, okay, well, now what are we going to do? So we're kind of to the point now. I have stuff for kits. I have all of these things together, and we set up an event that allow us, and they're usually, we don't get to give them that stuff away. They let us go in with the kindness rocks. We come in as we're, they know what we're doing. Like but if it's like a young kid area, we don't have a bunch of stuff up about overdose and things like that. It's just about Hummingbird, and kindness and spreading awareness through kindness and things like that. But then once people start engaging with us, they're like, well,
Clicking on
you come and talk to our school?
Yeah.
What's that?
Clicking on the QR code to
yes,
what
exactly.
it really means. And then they
exactly. Or they'll pull me aside and like secretly ask me, what do you think you could do? And because again, they don't want to be known as the person that asks about it, and so the more I talk about it, I am seeing a stigma. I am seeing it falling. I'm seeing it dropping. I'm seeing it, but it's, it's kind of like it going from the bottom up. You know what I mean? Our kids are never going to know a life without fentanyl. They're never going to remember not hearing the word fentanyl or knowing what that is, right? And my granddaughter, Penelope, her dad was Christopher, my oldest son, who passed away. So we have her full time now. And luckily, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. And, if my son hadn't got his girlfriend pregnant in high school, which at the time was the crisis, and, we didn't know what to do, but it happened for a reason, and she gets to carry on his legacy, and she is so much him. She is, every day I look at her, I'm like, oh my gosh, you are your dad's daughter. And today I need to remind myself how much I miss that.
Yeah, there's the days like that.
Because you're very chatty today, or something. But she's incredible. And I will say the biggest lesson I have learned in all of this, and this is really what I want people to know, is that I now have a completely different relationship with my kids and my granddaughter. She knows everything there is to know about fentanyl and opioids and what to do how to recognize those signs and and every time she learned something new, she said, maybe we can have an assembly at my school and teach people about it. And so that would be great.
Yeah.
We're not there yet because they won't let us in. Yeah. But we're working on it. We're trying to get there.
On the door.
Yes. Yeah. And I asked her, and I'm almost brutally honest with her because I feel like Well, I went the other way first, and that was not the right, I wish I would have been able to share this information with my kids. But I asked her, okay, well, now that you know this information, like now that we've talked about what this word means and what all of these things are, does that make you want to go try to try it? And she was like, no, why? Why would I do that? And I said, well, and she goes, why do people do drugs? And I said, honey, it's kind of like, I said, people sometimes want to change the way they feel.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean they're feeling bad. Sometimes they just, I said, like when you go on a roller coaster and it gives you that feeling in your tummy, and, it's like really exciting, and then it's over.
Yeah.
And then next time you go, you want to do it again because, it gave you that really exciting feeling. And she's like, yeah. And I said, it's kind of like that. People want to just experience feelings that they don't feel all the time.
Yeah.
There are people who do it to escape things and not feel because they have bad things that are going on. And that's where it's dangerous because they don't want to ever feel normal, or they become, they get to a point where they can no longer feel normal because their body is used to them taking it. And, and I learned these ways to talk to her in an age appropriate way where, she's also just amazing in general.
She really is. I attest.
She really is. I mean, we talked about, she asked me about addiction recently. And so I was open to her about it. And I said, and Penelope, that's one thing I said that does run in your family. You have a grandpa who was an alcoholic and you have these things. So you just have to be really careful. If there's ever anything you want to experience or try or whatever, be open and talk to people and talk to me if you can, if not me, someone else, but just so that everybody is on board and knows what it is so that it doesn't become a problem.
Right.
And she said, well, why would I need to do that? I was trying to explain. She goes, well, what happens, when somebody does? So we look at different things, and we talked about mushrooms because I will say that one thing I have learned in all of my research is my son Christopher used to tell us all the time that he knew we didn't understand because we didn't do drugs or condone them or like it or whatever. But he said, you tell me all the time how dynamic I am and how, charismatic I am and how amazing I am. The only time I see that is if I'm taking psilocybin.
Well, and we can differentiate the difference between plant medicines and drugs.
Yes, exactly. But because I didn't have a difference then, right? It was all drugs. I mean, it was everything, marijuana was the same thing as cocaine or meth or whatever. Like it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And now I've learned that there is a huge difference. And the plant medicine, they really do heal, right? And so I'm kind of explaining.
I think it's plant medicines are here to help us connect with ourselves, where drugs are here to help us disconnect from ourselves.
Absolutely.
People use drugs because they want to numb the pain.
Yes.
What we need to do if we want to combat the drug problem is heal pain, heal trauma.
Absolutely.
Drugs
Absolutely.
are the problem. Pain is.
Yep. Exactly.
Trauma is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and so when she had such a clear understanding of it, of what I was explaining, and I also told her, there may be a time in your life that you want to experiment with things, and that's not necessarily wrong, but you have to wait until it's appropriate. You have to be an adult because your brain is still growing.
Yeah.
You can do things to your brain when you're too young that
and change it forever.
The damage can't be. Yes.
Yeah.
And she got it, and she understood that, and so that's why I was like, why have people not been telling us to tell this to kids all the
yes.
You know what I mean? Why didn't I know this as a kid? Why didn't my kids know this as a kid?
So
because I started a campaign calling that it says just say no, but the say is crossed out, and the no is changed into KNOW. So just no. Did you know this about fentanyl, or did you whatever? When I first started the foundation, I made this very soft, warm, welcoming, like I needed, like everybody needed a warm hug type of environment, because that's what I was needing, I think, at the time. And I joined all of these online support groups and, things on Facebook, parents who have lost sons and, all of these things. And they welcome you in like that. It's like a warm hug, and you feel so surrounded, and you feel not alone, right? Because everybody is going through something similar that you've gone through. But I started noticing about 3 months in or so, I would leave those places feeling worse than when I went in, because there are people who like to stay in that negativity, right? I was feeling the need to make something positive happen and make something, meaningful come from their lives. And I was seeing people saying, it's been 247 weeks since my son passed away or whatever. And I'm like, I mean, I don't judge you for staying in that. And I know people who thrive in negativity and chaos and want to surround themselves with it, but I couldn't stay in that anymore. I thanked them, and I wished them all luck, and I said it's time for me to go, because it would pull me down. It's like being surrounded by people who are in grief and in that space is you feed off of it. Like people feed off of it. And I saw a couple of other women on there. They mostly were women's groups, not all of them, but I was saying, is there any positive news in here? Like, does anything, like I'm feeling like I need some sunshine type of messages. And I was like, oh, well, at least I'm not, okay. Maybe I'm not the only one that's, feeling like, like I said, it would drag me down to go into those places.
Well, that kind of goes back to the night when your husband said, we have a choice here.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're coming out of it. And then, and let me just say, you and your husband both sound incredibly wise, because there's so many things that you have said where I'm like, you just intuitively knew, like the fire that you felt, and you said, I wanted to make something some meaning from their lives.
Yes.
And that you wanted it to not only help you, but to help other people. All of these things are why those grief groups, although they can be good for a time being, weren't right for you in the long run, because you needed something bigger. The fire in you needed something.
Yes. And I wanted to leave some, I didn't want to see my kids start falling off into that either. Right. Like, I feel like we needed to keep moving forward, and there are days where it's, one step forward and 5 steps back, and that's okay. That's what I'm coming to realize, is that it I don't think grief ever ends necessarily, but we can learn things from it. We can make things beautiful because of it, and my son Christopher, as he got older, I said, when I told you when he was younger, he was very charismatic and very, center of attention seeking, and, and loved all of those things. And after he had his daughter, he developed social anxiety. And he got to the point where we would have to beg him to go to a restaurant with us. And we would be halfway through a meal, and he would ask if he could go sit in the car. He would tell me, I don't know how I'm going to do for her what you do for me. How am I going to be a parent to her? How am I going to give her how am I going to be able to, to make something great happen for her? And, of course I would tell him the mom things to tell him, and, you're going to be great. You are a great dad. She loves you so much. And that's all of that was true. But he said, but how can one man make a difference? How can just one person make a difference? He was very philosophical in his thinking. And right out of high school, he told me, he's like, why do we have to work? Like, why do we have to make money? Why can't we just do something like, if I know how to build a house, I'll build you a house. And if you know how to do, and I was like, well, I mean, there's communes, and, and he wanted to join the Peace Corps, but then he found out he had to go to college first. And so he was like, but so he was like, maybe not. But when it hit me all of a sudden one day that I was like, baby, this is you. This is one man making a difference in the world. That's my job now, is your legacy. And he is making a difference to so many people, and so that's, yes. And through her, and that's what I want her to know. And so it's been a really beautiful, experience in that. And then also, my relationship with my other kids is completely different. So we went from, are you crazy? Like, to the kids, like, no, smoke weed, no, all of these things, right? To what we decided I guess it's been 4 years ago now. They talked me into going to my first rave, EDC Music Festival, and I love it. Like, the environment there is so warm and welcoming, and I can feel their spirit. I can feel them there every time. And so now we've made it a tradition, and we go as a family, and everybody that comes up there's like, your parents come with you to these. that is so cool, you know. And they love having us there. They show us off. Like they love that we do it together. We go to
Kristen,
concerts together.
tell the story of John and Christopher's friend and what he said to you at the EDC.
So this past year, when we go, it's a 3-night festival in Las Vegas at the Raceway, and I always skip the middle night because I'm old and I need to. If I'm going to walk on the third night, I've got to skip the second night. And so, but we always take their ashes with us and spread them when we go to these new places. Anywhere that we would have wanted them to be with us, or that they would have wanted to see. Like Red Rocks was our first place to go. We just sprinkle a little bit of ashes. So they do a fireworks show every night during EDC that is blow your mind amazing. And so that's become our thing. Like when the fireworks start, that's when we spread the ashes, right? And we go as a group of about 20 people. And most of them are our kids and their friends and the friends that went with even our older sons when they would go. And this one, my son Bryce's best friend from childhood, so he's known all of the boys forever too. Used to go to music festivals with Christopher, John, and Bryce as a group. And he pulled me aside this year and he said, I just want you to know. He said, some kids are the star basketball player, or some kids are the MVP at this, or some kids, are the best at getting good grades. He said, Christopher and John were the MVP of this world. He said they would love that you were here. It would make them so happy. And he said, I love seeing Jordan, who's my number 4 son now.
My daughter Jesse's bestie.
Yeah. Yep. Jesse's best friend. I love seeing him because John was just like that. John was the nurturer and the caretaker, and making sure people were drinking water and making sure people had shade. And that's what my son Jordan does. And he had no idea that was John's role, and neither did I. Yeah. And he said, and Christopher was the go-getter, he was the part, like everybody wanted to be around him. And he said they would love this. Mm-hmm. And so that, of course, touched me like nothing else. And I came home and I was like, I think I'm retiring. I think I'm retiring from maybe going to these big music festivals because I'm old. And I had this moment, and this is a funny story, actually. I had this moment where I was kind of standing on the edge of the platform, kind of looking over down into the crowd, right? Mm-hmm. Just happened to be where our section was this one day. And I saw this older gentleman in the front row. He had on like the concert T-shirt. I can't remember who the band was, but he had on a T-shirt. And I kind of laughed, and I was like elbowing my kid, and I said, "That's going to be you when you're old. You're going to be standing down there going this." And I go, "Oh wait, that's me right now. I'm the old one. I'm the one doing that, And so that was kind of a moment for me I was like, oh, maybe I am the old one here, Yeah. And so when I came home, I told them, this is going to be my last EDC. I think I'm going to call it quits. And Penelope said, but what about me? Mm-hmm. You have to take me. You have to go with me. And I was like, okay, right. When you're old enough, in another 10 years, or whatever, I'll go with you one time. And so I made that pact with her and then my grandson is 2, and he has one particular song that's a dance music EDM song. And when it comes on, he starts dancing, and I was like, okay, well, I guess maybe I'm going to be going 2 more times because he's going to want to go at some point too. So.
And then you invited me to Decadence for New Year's Eve, so you're
again. That's a little different. It is a festival. It is, but it's more concert feel than the music festival. Yeah. But yes. Yeah. Yeah. But I love now being in those spaces because I feel surrounded by them. I feel their spirit in the space, and and to do that with my family, and to be there with my kids and my husband, and to experience all of that together. Yeah. It's bittersweet because it makes me sad that we missed out on it. Yeah. With the boys, but it's so special that we've, been able to make those memories with our other kids.
Well, this is you embracing the surge of feeling that you were having when you belonged to that Facebook group. You were like, I can't just hold my grief. There needs to be something else to hold with it.
Yes.
And now
I could drown in it, you can, and if you let it, for sure.
Now you're holding both. I can have joy and feel grief at the loss of my sons. Like you hear, this entire conversation has been about darkness and light. John and Christopher, the sun and the moon.
For sure. Yep. For sure.
You rejecting the elders that wanted to like send you some false sense of shame at the death of your sons, and then helping the whole, like this whole sector of the universe heal its shame around this topic by not telling your kids what to think, but teaching them how to think. You're changing the system for an entire generation into a healthier, more positive, more leveraged, more intelligent.
And it is different. What feels different about it is they are so much less curious about it almost. It's like now they have all this information and now they could care less if they did it or didn't do it.
Yeah.
And so that was an epiphany for me,
Wherever the thinking came from that like information is, it's going to somehow drive the not wanted behavior forward, that's crap.
Right.
We need to let that ideology die. So tell people about the Hummingbird Project. How do they find it? How can they help? How do they get help if they have heard this story and relate?
Sure. Well, we have a website right now, thehummingbird.project.com, and you can make donations on there as well. But it's really about the education and the awareness to it. And so they can find all of that information on our website, and that will also lead them to our social media. And I think that's probably the best place to start anyway. On our social media, on our website page, you can see our documentary. So you can hear more about our story here and see pictures and videos of the kids and
that we've referenced a few times in this conversation.
Yes.
Her husband.
Yep, exactly. Yep, you can see him on there as well. And you can also see we've been on a couple of different news. There's a couple of news stories and things like that. And then sign up for our newsletter. You'll get information as we start pushing things forward. Like I said, we're always evolving and really trying to narrow in. I think we've kind of got it. We have, we're going to go after the insurance companies and see if we can get them to change their rules, because we have a lot of nightclubs and bars that are on board. They want it. They want to have have things available, and but they can't get insurance.
We haven't described the kits that you created. So what are those? Because this is how it can help.
Little bag, a little kit. This is what people can request. Once we're in the process of creating the curriculum for just a quick training, right? So that people can watch a little video, learn what the signs are, and then we will send them free Narcan. And the other cool thing about it though is it's all harm reduction. It's not just Narcan. We have cup covers in there for people who go to a bar and they want to make sure that their drink doesn't get spiked. I have individual breathalyzers in there, and so we have a big focus on college campuses, and so we're trying to get them in on like sorority houses, like or the floor manager has a station in their room, so that and then they will also get a sticker that has a hummingbird on it and a pin, so people will know when they see that person, that's who has Narcan, or that's where that's the room they can go to if they need a fentanyl testing strip or whatever. And we want to continue to give these away for free. So we are always looking for corporate sponsors who want to co-brand things with us and help us get things out to the general public and be part of the solution.
And those are called HOPE kits: harm reduction, overdose, poison prevention, and education.
Yep, that's it. You got it.
I have goosies all over my body.
Thank you.
So amazing. Hey, Kristen, we are going to ask you our final question that we ask everyone. What are you grateful for?
I thought about this and I go back and forth. And of course, I'm grateful for my husband and his amazing ability to give me all of this time and space to grow. I'm also grateful for friends who see me and still love me, because I am different. I'm changing. I'm evolving. I'm not the friend I used to be. And so when I come across the people who see me and still want to be there, it means a lot.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this incredible story and about Christopher and John, because truly their legacy lives on through you and through your family and through the Hummingbird Project. It is something to be really proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was great.
I see you turning your tragedy into triumph, my friend.
Thank you.
You're one of the bravest women I know, and I love you so much.
Thank you. I love you too.
SoulStirred listeners, thank you so much for joining us today as we bring you stories of growth in the human experience. We appreciate you, and we have a request for you. If you will take 30 seconds to do these 3 things for us. 1, follow or subscribe to SoulStirred Podcast. This makes sure you never miss an episode and helps us to make sure you never miss an episode. Head over to your preferred platform, click the SoulStirred Podcast show page, and click the plus sign or the follow button. Second, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating while you're there. Finally, choose your favorite episode and share it with a friend.
We are so grateful to all of our listeners for your continued support helping SoulStirred grow and ultimately inspire others through authentic connection. Don't hesitate to reach out with ideas, stories, or questions. We are always eager to hear from you. Our email and social links are found in every episode's show notes. Until next time, keep stirring your soul and embracing your journey.
Take good care of yourselves and of each other. Bye-bye.